What is going on, guys?
Stop. Stop.
It's your boy, Matty fucking Smokes.
There's 4 motherfuckers in this car.
Except for it's just the two of us.
There's 2 motherfuckers in this room.
There's 2 motherfuckers in this room. This is going in the video 100%. How do I normally start these things?
How do you usually start your video?
What is going on?
Stop.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Cinematically Late, the series where I talk about movies, TV shows, whatever the case may be that I may have missed for whatever reason, whether they were in theaters or I just never got around to watching them. Today we are doing a different format, more of the podcast style. It's been a while since I've done this. I know it's October and probably should be doing spookier stuff, but this particular thing that we're going to be talking about today kind of came out of left field for me. I guess it's been out for a little while, but I need to bring in what I consider to be an expert on the topic, which is the lovely Victoria.
Hello, everyone.
She is here with me in studio as we discuss the Hulu series, Normal People. Now, since you're the authority on it of the two of us, do you want to give us a little bit of background about Normal People?
I wouldn't call myself the authority, but I would call myself an expert.
Well, I mean, you watched the series twice and
Yes.
are currently reading the book as of the recording of this video.
Yes.
So I'm pretty sure that makes you more of an expert than me.
Fair enough. So, Normal People is based off of a novel by Sally Rooney, and she wrote this novel in 2018, but it was based off of a short story that she published on the White Review, which is a UK-based journal, in 2016. It was a short story. And then she felt very compelled by, writing about these 2 characters and turned it into a novel, which published, like I said, in 2018. And then in 2020 was adapted into a show by Hulu in collaboration with the BBC. So it's just basically 2 people. They start at the beginning of the story. They start in their late teens. They're finishing what we here in America call high school, and it's based in Carrickley, which is in Sligo, and it's a very small rural town in Ireland. And it continues as they both go to college in Dublin, and it's kind of like viewing into their relationship and how they evolve. There's Marianne, and then there's Connell, and then they're played by Daisy Edgar-Jones and Paul Mescal, respectively, and they do really well. I gotta say, they do really, really well.
I was pretty impressed with it. I obviously didn't know anything about it other than you watching it and then you just being so obsessed with it. And then, of course, I had to jump on the bandwagon and find out exactly what is this show that you're watching.
Right.
So I had to jump on it there. For me, it was definitely very interesting. I'll admit, and we'll get to it later, it was a little bit difficult to watch sometimes, not just because of sometimes the subject matter, but some of what was going on. It's sometimes a little bit difficult to watch. But for the most part, it was something that I liked a lot. So without further ado, let's get into some of the things that we liked and didn't like about it. So the first thing I think I really want to talk about is just how real and sort of raw it felt. I think that's one of the best things about this series.
I would definitely say the title does it justice. It's literally normal people going through life. Very different people too. Marianne is not very liked in her school, while Connell is this athlete star, very popular, and yet their lives kind of converge in a very unique but also very real way. It doesn't feel like when you're watching like the Disney Channel and you get this very fake, overly fluffy love. It's love like it would happen realistically. And that's one of the things that I really liked about the show. Like you said, it's very raw. And it wasn't done like that just, organically. It took a lot of working with, people who are experts in the subject matter. So they had, I read somewhere they had an intimacy coordinator, like a person who was coordinating every move of like their sex scenes, for example, to make them seem as genuine to real life as possible. And you really get that feel when you're watching it.
And more than just beyond that, it also kind of gives you, when I say like raw and real, it's not just like, oh, Connell's the popular kid. He's dealing with a lot of things internally as well. And like the way that's kind of expressed, which is very rarely shown. As a man watching this show, like it's not something that people show very often.
Yeah, I think in Hollywood in general, women are always portrayed as being the ones who are sensitive and overly emotional and having this internal conflict, while men go through things like this. I think men's mental health is just as important as women's, and I think it's something that is definitely not talked about very often. And it's very well portrayed in the show, and even in the book, it's even further explained, that internal conflict that Connell is going through, even though it may not be apparent to the people on the outside. I feel like at first I was kind of hesitant to show you because I didn't think it would be your cup of tea. And I don't think it would be the cup of tea of a lot of people. I think a show like Normal People has a very specific audience to it. And because of their relationship is, like you said, you described it as very frustrating. And it is very frustrating because you're watching it from the outside. And I think we do that a lot as people. We judge what other people are doing or feeling from the outside. But if we were in their shoes, would we have done things differently than these people? And I think it's like a lesson in that, watching this show. I also like the way that they place the story in terms of a timeline. I don't know if you felt that way too, but it was very fast moving, but at the same time compiling a lot of stuff into 28 minutes per episode. So like what you're trying to say is like, despite the subject matter not being action packed or something constantly happening, it's very well paced. Even if there's a jump in time, it doesn't feel like you lost a lot. Like you can kind of get the understanding that this time has passed, not a whole lot has happened, maybe the same kind of thing has happened, but you're not missing anything, but it's just well paced. I think you have a lot going on, even in the first 4 episodes. I remember you're like, Jesus Christ, we're only 4 episodes in and all of this has happened already. And one thing that I want to kind of commend the people that made the show for is having stuck very, very closely to the original story. As I'm reading the books and rewatching the series with you, I realize how tight it is to the original story. I think I read somewhere that the author also co-wrote the screenplay version of it for at least the first 6 or something episodes. Mm-hmm. They had it set up very early on that maybe it wasn't like a J.K. Rowling hands in the pie the entire time, but that she was involved in it. So you got that sort of, those characters were true to what they are. Yeah, when I tell you it's word by word exactly the same thing, it's kind of amazing. So the book is definitely an additive to learning more of what their internal conflict is, which you don't get a whole lot of in shows because it's more dialogue than anything else. Right. But it's if you were just to watch, I would never tell someone not to read the book. But if in this particular case, if you were to just watch Normal People, the show, you wouldn't be missing a whole lot from the book. You're literally watching everything exactly as it happens. And that's something that I have to commend the writers for. And the people involved in it for, because it's difficult to do. That's why a lot of people watch movies and they're like, this is not at all how it was in the book. But that you can't say that about this. It's very close to the original story. And I think that how today's content really is, that this feels like a breath of fresh air, not because it's based on a book, which is very popular as a genre, but it feels different. It's not... Although it is a slower story, like I mentioned before, it's not super action-packed with things happening all the time. The way it's presented, the way it's written, the way it's paced, it's kind of nice that it's not... It's kind of a break from that everyday life without going too overboard. And I think that's a major point that I really liked about this, is that it felt new, but it wasn't overwhelming in terms of trying to be realistic and stressful in today's world, or trying to present portal in the sky that aliens are going to come through and superheroes have to band together. It felt good to watch something not overly anxiety driving in some way. I mean, I wouldn't fully say it's not
Well,
anxiety
that's true.
inducing because it definitely can be, but it's
Yeah.
a different form of anxiety,
Sure.
I think. I think it's calm enough where you can watch it for what it is, which is the story of two people making it through life. I think what makes it easier for us, and by us I mean you and I, to relate to the stories because we're around the same age group as they are. Because as this takes place, the book starts in 2011 in their like last year of high school, which is the year that I was in my last year of high school. So I think you learn a lot. You can relate to a lot because you can remember being an 18-year-old trying to figure out college. You know, in your case, girls, or in my case, boys, or, you know, relationships and friendships and what's going to happen. And it's a lot and it's very overwhelming. And when you look back on it, you're like, this is so silly. But when you're in that moment, it can be very difficult to cope with everything. And I think that's what we see happening here. One thing that Connell talks about in the show is how once a specific stage of your life is over and you make a decision to do something else, like go to college, for example, sometimes you feel like you want to get back to those moments in the past, but that life is gone and all those moments are gone. And I think it's difficult to cope with like the friendships that you've had forever all of a sudden ending. And I think that happens to a lot of people when you go to college and you move on with your life after that. So you get to see all of that in the screen. And even though I think that dialogue is very limited because it's very like A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B. There's not like a whole monologue, or, well, I think Connell has one.
There's like
at
one
some
or two
point.
at some point.
But it's very visually appealing, like the show. It's beautifully presented. It's very raw, very real, very different to things that you see nowadays. And they're commended not just by, you know, the audiences watching it, but like people, like professional reviewers who have seen the show have loved it for what it is, which is like the raw story of two people.
And I think that characterizes kind of, and you can see the similarities when you're watching the show, I think. I don't know if she drew any inspiration, but one of your favorite series, the Before series with Ethan Hawke and Judy Delpy, is that her name? Okay. And I could kind of remember her name, but I was like, I'm not sure if that's the right lady. The Before series, which is one of your favorite movie series, it feels very reminiscent of that. Obviously, the subject matter is kind of different from that particular franchise, but did you see the parallels? Do you feel like it may have not necessarily been influenced by that, but like what was it about? Like I saw parallels. Was there anything that you
Definitely.
saw?
I think there's differences in terms of who the characters are, where Ethan and Julie's characters don't know each other at all. And they're meeting in Europe in like a random city. And they build from there. Whereas in the case of normal people, Connell already has a very, he already has judgment towards Marianne based on her popularity or whether people like her or not in their school and stuff like that. And they have to build on years of knowing this person as being someone who's unpopular and unliked. But I see the similarities of two people going back and forth, like two soulmates who find a way to find each other over time. I like the Before series because I like the idea of people just kind of like finding themselves again, even if years go by. And I think in Connell and Marianne's story, even though it's a lot more short term because they're like, they don't see each other for like 6 months, but then they find each other again and things like that. It's still like a beautiful thing to watch, I think. So I definitely see the parallels, but it's definitely a different experience as well. I hope that that's what Sally's hoping to do with this, that she continues the story by, you know, showing us what Marianne and Connell are doing in the future type of thing. I think that will be very interesting. I think it can definitely work that way, if that's what you're getting at. Like, it can definitely be set up as the Before series.
Yeah, and the way it ends, it's definitely not the end, I don't think. But
I hope not.
I hope not, but obviously there hasn't been a second novel, and
What's interesting is that
due to
the
the
story.
pandemic, they're not really knowing if or when they're going to film it at all, type of thing. So
that story I was telling you about at the beginning, at the clinic, which was a story that originally launched the story of Marianne and Connell, takes place in the future. It doesn't take place at the beginning like the story does. So the at the clinic takes place after the ending of Normal People. And it's interesting because we're all here wondering what happens to them. But there is a little bit of a glimpse of what happens to them, which is they continue to chase each other around. But I want to see them further in the future. Like, what's going to happen when they're, like, in their mid-30s? You know, are they figuring life out? Or are they still doing this crazy back and forth year after year? And I think that's where the things you disliked about it come in.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I disliked the most, I loved a good majority of this, but especially, I feel like it was prevalent in the beginning with their sort of back and forth, chasing each other kind of thing. But there comes a point where it's just like frustrating that these two are either miscommunicating or there's just something that goes on between them that causes another problem to occur for them to split or for them to
that could have been easily solved.
Easily rectified. And I think that is my biggest con about this. And maybe it's just because that's how it's written, and that's because they want to have that conflict of normal people, of realistic people, that maybe sometimes we need to communicate more, have that dialogue. But these two don't do it, and especially for two that are so attracted to each other, they find almost every excuse in the book to not be together. But they both want it so badly, but they keep finding every reason just to not be, and it's just...
Definitely. But I think that's a job well done that we can feel that way, because if we didn't, then they would have failed at portraying the story for what it is. Because when you read the book, you get the same feeling of, what are you doing right now? But that's another thing that I commend the people that made the show for, is having given us that frustration of, Connell, for the love of God, or, you know, like trying to encourage his characters to make different decisions and be more open and communicate. And I think what you said is true. I think we need to learn to communicate better, because we saw the show is like a physical representation of what happens when you don't, when you let miscommunication take years of your life away from you, which happened to them. Like, they could have easily solved certain situations by just talking to one another, and they spent years dealing with that situation that could have been easily solved. So yeah, it's definitely frustrating, for sure.
Did you have anything that frustrated you in particular about the show, or anything that you would say? I mean, I think I get the impression that you loved it, obviously, as you've watched it now twice and are reading the book. But is there anything that you would maybe want to change or feel like that could be different about it?
I do.
Or improve it?
I do. I think reading the book gave me a little bit of insight. I wish, and this is just, I guess, feedback, not necessarily something that we need, but I think it would have definitely added to the depth of the show. And I think one of those things is Marianne's family conflicts and Marianne's inability to settle for a relationship that's functional isn't as explored in the show as it is in the books. Do you remember spoilers?
It's okay. Just go over it. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler, guys. Spoiler. Marianne is telling Connell about the situation with Alan. By the way, Alan is Marianne's brother, about how he's very violent towards her. And then Connell asked her if her dad used to, hit her too. And in the show, she says he hadn't. In the book, they do. Like, he does beat both Alan and Marianne. And Marianne goes into this whole tangent in the book about feeling like she needs men to abuse her because she's deserved it. Like, she deserves to be hurt because she's a bad person inherently. And she has this kind of damaged quality to her that isn't as obvious, I don't think, in the show. They also talk about how, do you remember how it was Jamie who was a sadist? But in the book, it was actually Marianne who encouraged Jamie to do these things to her. So I think if we would have known a little bit about that, we would have understood why Marianne keeps making this really shitty life decisions with his partners and stuff like that.
Do you feel like that was a creative choice to make us be more on Marianne's side? from a viewer's standpoint versus a
I think it was
reader's
just a
standpoint?
way to simplify a lot of the. For example, in the show, she says the way she explains Jamie's proclivities is by saying he's into pain, but in the book, she just straight up says he's a sadist. So I think for TV, they try to adjust it in a way that would be more simple to understand what was happening, where she has to explain what being a sadist means. Whereas in the book, it's assumed that if you're reading it, you probably have some semblance of understanding of what certain things are. And I just think it was because they couldn't necessarily fit everything that was happening in the book. I wouldn't have chosen to take that out. I would have definitely put that in because that added another layer of depth to Marianne that we don't really get to see. Like, we understand that she's damaged, obviously, just by the relationship with Alan alone and her mom. But if we would have really understood what her internal turmoil was like I deserve to be abused. Maybe I deserve to be hurt. Maybe I don't deserve to be loved. Because I think Marianne is very much presented as someone that lets everything just kind of, go. Doesn't really care about what people think. But in the inside, she cares a little bit about what people say to her. And, the stuff that her brother continuously tells her to do, like kill herself and do all these things. And I think if we would have understood a little bit deeper, we would have maybe had a different outlook on Marianne, if that makes sense.
And just to sort of end things on a more positive note, because the negative, I think we brought down a little bit, but that is the show. The acting, I think, because I think that has to be touched upon. The way these characters are portrayed, obviously, it's not like something we've seen before, like these characters in another version or anything.
It's brilliant.
Okay.
ASMR in the Aaron Waller channel.
Okay, so the acting is very good. I mean, I've never seen.
No, they're completely unknown.
So they're completely unknown, and
I mean, I think maybe they had like little roles and there.
Maybe like in Ireland where they are from and things like that. But
nothing like this.
Okay, so for newcomers, basically, being on a Hulu show with BBC production and all that stuff.
Kids, because mind you, they're really young.
Yeah, I think that you said they were like...
She's like 22 and he's like 24.
Yeah. Astounding. I really don't have any complaints about the acting, which is kind of why I kind of want to end on this high point, because I don't think...
If you watch it for any reason, just watch it for how good these two people are at acting this part.
Yeah. And
keep in mind that in real life, they're exactly the opposite of their characters. So the fact that they were able to portray these people who are not at all like they are, it's brilliant. They're brilliant. And it's a very, maybe uncomfortable situation to be in. If you see the show, you'll notice what we mean. There's a lot of sex scenes, and I think puts you in a bit of a vulnerable position. But they did it so well that you have to commend them for it, for sure.
Definitely a highlight. Yeah, I think that's it. That's all I have. Anything you want to add? Anything you want to plug?
Watch the show. Watch it. It's great.
Okay, great. You don't even want to plug me? I'm your husband.
Should I plug you?
Well, I'm going to have to plug myself, and this is going to...
Please go ahead and subscribe. Hit that like button. Turn on the notification bell. Leave a comment. Check out the rest of the channel. There's a lot of great content on there. You like movies? We got movies.
I think that's the best plug I will ever have for myself and ever will do. Thank you so much, Victoria, for joining me today on the special version of the podcast style version of Cinematically Late. Always fun when we have these conversations. But if you did like this episode, like Victoria said, make sure you hit the like button, comment down below. I greatly appreciate it. New Cinematically Late every single Thursday. So make sure you subscribe for that, as well as have a live every single Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, or in this case, also listening. And I hope you guys have a good one. Hope to see you in the next one.